I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. And I want to welcome those of you who are online as well. I want to thank our amazing staff, Latifa, Anthony, Candace, Neelam, Dawn, Lizzie, Jim. Did I miss anybody? Just thank you so much for your work. And I appreciate all that you're doing. And we are with you. We're with you. We're going to talk more about this a little bit later. Thanks to United Way for letting us be here today. This is a great meeting place. So, okay. As we look at the agenda today, we're going to be reviewing what the MOU committee has been doing up to date, a couple of things surrounding that. And I want to hear conversation. I want you to please speak up today. We're going to discuss the work that was led by Kim Carpenter on the state's plan. We're going to also approve some grant budgets, funding grants, and we're going to look at formula recommendations. That's what we're going to do today. I want to ask everyone here and online to help me in making this a orderly, well-run meeting. And what I mean by that is let's make sure we raise our hand and be called on to speak. Don't interrupt each other. And I know you probably know this, but I'm just going over this for my sake. And also, when you are sharing, if you will try to be brief and succinct with what it is you want to share, because we've got a lot to cover and I want to hear from everybody. I want everybody to feel comfortable speaking out. So think in terms of 2 minutes. Okay. Of course, you don't have to keep to 2 minutes, and this is not a demand. It's just a request so that we can use our time really wisely. So, let's begin with introductions. And what I'd like for you to do is share your name, your role with Volunteer Tennessee, and maybe a little bit about your role outside of Volunteer Tennessee. So I'll start. My name is Terry Silver. I'm chair of the board. Recently, I've been working with before being chair, I was on the communications committee for a long time. And I'm a retired professor of education from the University of Tennessee at Martin. So I'll go to my left.
Wow. My name is Deshanta. I am a non-pension, I believe, member through the Department of Children's Services. I oversee all 95 counties, all interns and volunteers who volunteer within our department.
Hi, I'm Lizzie. I'm the AmeriCorps Program Manager for Volunteer Tennessee. I've been here about 8 months now. Originally, I'm from Maine.
I'm Betty White. I'm vice chair. I am a retired service learning director from University School. I've been retired now 5 years and from paid work, but I still do a lot of work that isn't paid, which is just, I get to choose now. I get to choose everything I do for the most part. So it's a lot of fun. And I am now on the board development committee after being on the Foundations of Service committee for about 2 years.
Hi, I'm Jason Scott. I'm a commissioner. This is my third term. I've been around for a while. I'm currently on the strategic partnerships / communication committee after being on board development for a good long while. Outside of this, I'm the director of the CAC.
Hey, good morning. My name is Adam Jarvis. I am the chief of staff with Finance and Administration and serve as Jim Bryson's designee on the commission. Is he here?
I am Nancy Chalene. I am the representative for the Department of Environment and Conservation, where I work for Tennessee State Parks as a statewide programs manager. Focused on volunteers, friends groups, interpretation, education.
My name is Stephanie Davis, board member, and also serve as treasurer on PRISM, Volunteer Tennessee, and I serve on another board for East Tennessee East Tennessee Valley Coalition House.
I'm Katie Goforth. I'm retired from the University of the South, where I was community development director. Yeah, so I really understand and appreciate the advantages that Katie talked about.
Hi, I'm Don Sowers, and not to be outdone by the University of the South, we get all universities represented here today. I teach at Tennessee Tech University, a graduate course in emergency management of volunteers and donations and disasters. So That's kind of up my alley, and I'm the manager of disaster volunteer services and the acting Tennessee State Search Committee Emergency Response Team. I work.
Yvonne Double with your Tennessee staff.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Bennett, Systems and Process Manager for Volunteer Tennessee. Really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you.
Leticia Fields, Volunteer Tennessee staff. I have been a Volunteer Tennessee for 3 months, 3 years. 3 years as of July, yeah.
Candace,
Oh my God.
miss you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Candace Taylor. I'm the Training and Special Events Manager. I am also on the board with Friends of Volunteer Tennessee. I am also a recent trainer with the CERT program. And, and also, I am about to be on the board of the Higher Ed Consortium. So it's really nice to see you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Clark. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for the Tennessee Department of Human Services, and I'm here serving as Commissioner Carter's designee.
Good morning. I am Nathan Farner, assistant appointed commissioner or assistant appointed by the governor to be a commissioner. Day job is I work in the provost office at East Tennessee State University. I'm a community engagement specialist. I manage all of our community and nonprofit partnerships for the institution. This will be my second year on the commission, and I chair the large yet productive communications strategic partnerships committee.
Your name and your association with the board.
Okay. My name is Trish Powell and I'm a second year, good grief, there's second year commissioner. And I had a nonprofit named National Austin Pierce.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim Snell with Volunteer Tennessee staff.
Would you like to call on? Go ahead.
No,
Okay, that's Rebecca. Would you start for the online introductions?
For those online, you should be able to come off mute.
How about
Able.
Susan? Can you introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning. This is Lieutenant Colonel Susan Parker. I'm the Director of Family Programs for the Tennessee National Guard.
Thank you. Amy?
Sorry, it's a little muffled. Did you say Amy?
I did.
Okay, I'm Amy LaGrone. I am the Senior Director of Engagement for the Tennessee Department of Education, representing Commissioner Reynolds, and this is my second year serving.
Thank you. We'll come back. Yvonne?
Hi, I'm Yvonne Wood. I'm located in Middle Tennessee. I've been on the commission since 2023. I'm the current treasurer, and I'm the strategic support manager for Greenlight Fund.
Kim?
I'm Kim Carpenter Drake. This is my second year as a commissioner. I am a social impact consultant and run the Middle Tennessee Donors Forum.
Thank you. Marla?
Hi, I'm Dr. Marla Cartwright, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Innovation in Teaching and Learning with the Tennessee Board of Regents, and I'm serving as proxy for Dr. Heidi Lemming.
Thank you. Master Sergeant General Kieran?
Master Sergeant Regan, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. I see you came off mute, but we can't hear you.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, we heard
Hear me
something.
now?
Yes,
Yeah.
Master and Karen Regan. I'm with J9 Family Programs with the Tennessee Army National Guard.
Thank you. Sarah? Okay. Elizabeth? Oh, okay, that's Lizzie. Terry Frank.
Yes, I'm Terry Frank, Anderson County Mayor, a gubernatorial appointee, and Anderson County is in East Tennessee.
Eileen, can you hear us?
Yes, and
Great.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm Eileen Wallum. I've been on the board for, I believe it's 13 years now. And, I'm currently the chair of the Grants Committee, formerly chair of the, Board Development Committee. I'm also the chair of Friends of Volunteer Tennessee. So I'm happy to be here, hoping to be there in person, but I have a really bad cough and don't want to give it to y'all.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone online that did not have an opportunity to introduce themselves? Okay. All right. Would you like to introduce yourself? We're just sharing our name and our association with Volunteer Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is LaShann Dixon, and I am with the Department of Health. I serve as the Director of the Office of Faith-Based and Community Engagement.
Thank you. All right. I didn't miss anyone, hopefully. Okay. Let's start with Eileen. Would you like to give us an update on Friends?
Yes, I sure will.
Thank
you. So we have a brand new member on the Friends board. His name is Jay Sanders, and he is the community relations supervisor at Middle Tennessee Electric, which serves the counties of Williamson, Rutherford, Cannon, and Wilson counties. And he learned about us at the conference and was a previous acquaintance of Greg Lyles. Anyhow, we welcome Jay this week, and we're very, very happy to have him and his experience with us. The license plate project, unfortunately, we're still only at about 120 license plate orders. And our expiration date is June 30th, which I've mentioned before. So it doesn't look like we're going to make it. And we could file for an extension, but we're kind of reluctant to do so because it would be really difficult for us to make it get almost 900 new orders in the next year. So we're trying to regroup and figure out what we're going to do in lieu of that. Let's see what else. We are, oh, yes. Regarding the termination of some of the AmeriCorps programs, we asked Jim and Candace to inform the program managers of those programs that their AmeriCorps members who have been terminated are still eligible to apply to the emergency fund, and there's still money in the emergency fund. So we're hoping that some of the members will be able to take advantage of that to help them get back home or whatever they need through this period. Also, Jay Sanders, our new member on Friends, informed us that he heads up the Middle Tennessee Electric Foundation and that they have emergency funds available that people can apply for. So we've asked Jim to let the programs know that as well. So yeah, that's it for Friends.
Thank you, Eileen.
You betcha.
Any questions? Questions? Comments? Thank you again. Jim, can you give us the director's report?
Yeah, well, so we'll talk more about this later, but as Eileen just hinted, the AmeriCorps agency terminated 14 of Volunteer Tennessee's 21 AmeriCorps programs. That included 3 planning grants and 11 operational grants. So the 3 didn't have members. They were planning for the potential of hosting an AmeriCorps program in the future. But then the others did have AmeriCorps members that the programs had to exit the program begin as of Monday. So we're working with the programs to wrap things up, per the instructions from the AmeriCorps agency. There's lots of questions about what that means in terms of the future, including the funding stuff that you all will talk about, later on today. So we don't have a whole lot of questions, but, happy to try to answer any questions you all might have about any of that. And again, I think a lot of that, some of those questions may come up again as we're talking about the commission's 3-year state plan, and obviously in the funding process discussion, questions will come up. So we can wait until then to discuss questions or talk about them now.
Comments, questions, anyone? All right, we will come back to this. Our first order of business is to confirm a quorum. There are currently 23 voting members, so we will need 12 voting members for a quorum. Jim, would you please do a roll call?
Sure. George Bovee. Destiny Brown. Tim Carpenter Drake. Tim, I think that was a.
Sorry, I've got a delay.
Got it. Yeah, and this is just a roll call for purposes of quorum, so here or present is totally fine. Stephanie Davis.
Here.
Nathan Varner. Here. Terry Frank.
Present.
Amy Gilliland. I think is gonna be joining us later, but I don't think is on just yet. Katie Goforth.
Present.
Rebecca Henderson. And Rebecca is on, but I think she's been having trouble with her microphone. Yeah, she just, okay, yeah, she said she says, I'm here.
Okay.
In email, okay, so she's here. Andrea Hill. Holly Jones. Amy LeGrone. Amy, are you still with us online? See her, her icon, yeah. Okay, we'll maybe come back to that. Lizette Lopez. Greg Lyles. Lee Moten. Patricia Powell.
Here.
Jason Scott.
Here.
Carrie Silver.
Here.
Tracy Vandevay. Amy Walter is also going to be a bit late. Betty White.
Here.
Eileen Wallam.
Here.
Yvonne Wood.
Here.
Suzanne Carr.
Here.
LaShawn Dixon.
Here.
DeShonta Gleaton.
Here.
Adam Jarvis. Caroline Ledley. Marla Cartwright.
Here.
Lieutenant Colonel Parker. Master Sergeant Regan.
Here.
Lieutenant Colonel Parker, I'm here as well.
Okay, thank you. Nancy Shalene.
Here.
Jessica Youngblum. And that's the roll call. And we have 12 voting members present,
Okay,
which is a quorum.
so we don't have to,
We do,
we just will have
we
to
do
do
need,
this.
yeah, because
Okay.
we don't have 12 in person.
Gotcha.
We've got 12 total, combining the in-person and the virtual.
Okay, I'm gonna read the statement of necessity. So just so you know, I'm reading it. Our next order of business is to approve a statement of necessity due to scheduling conflicts. Less than a quorum of Volunteer Tennessee Commission members are present in person for the meeting today. So under Tennessee Code annotated section 8-44-108, the Volunteer Tennessee Commission is allowed to rely on participation of members by electronic or other means to constitute a quorum, only upon determination by the commission that a necessity exists. The commission is scheduled to consider time-sensitive approvals to the 2025-26 Commission Support Grant and Commission Investment Fund budgets, 2025-26 Volunteer Center and Youth Civic Engagement Grant funding, and the 2025 AmeriCorps Formula funding. Do I hear a motion to approve the determination of necessity to proceed with the meeting with the quorum to include electronic and phone participants based on the time sensitivity of the matter on today's agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ed, do I have a second?
Second.
I heard Betty, I'm sorry. Okay.
So for those online, Adam made the motion and Betty White made the second.
Jen, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. And so this is a yay or nay, vote or abstain, for those online. George Bovee, Destiny Brown, Kim Carpenter Drake.
Aye. Yay, yes, whichever one you
Yeah, that's
want.
fine. Anything in the affirmative or the negative is fine. Stephanie Davis,
Yay.
Nathan Farner,
Yeah.
Terry Frank,
Yes.
Amy Gilliland, I don't believe has joined us yet. Katie Goforth.
Yes.
Rebecca Henderson. Let's see. She approves, she sent me an email saying she approves and votes for that, okay. Andrea Hill, I don't believe has joined us. Holly Jones, Amy LeGrone,
Yes.
Lizette Lopez, Greg Lyles, Lee Moten, Patricia Powell,
Yay.
Jason Scott,
Yay.
Terry Silver,
Yay.
Tracy Vandevay, Amy Walter, Betty White,
Yes.
Eileen Wallem,
Yes.
Yvonne Wood,
Yes.
Suzanne Carr,
Yes.
LaShawn Dixon, DeShonta Gleaton,
Yes.
Adam Jarvis,
Same.
Caroline Ledley, Marla Cartwright,
Yes.
Lieutenant Colonel Parker,
Yes.
okay, thank you. Master Sergeant Regan,
Yes.
Nestor Reyes, Nancy Shalene,
Yes.
Jessica Youngbloom. And the motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
Oh, with one abstention.
Okay, thank you. Our next order of business is to review and approve the minutes of our last meeting from February 17th, 2025. You should have a copy in front of you. And you should have received a copy, a link to the minutes last week. So if you'll take just a moment and look that over.
For those of you participating virtually, I posted in the chat a little earlier the link to the commission member website that has all of the materials for today. And I will, let's see, I will put that in the chat again, just for, in case anyone joined after I put that in the chat earlier.
Does anyone have any corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve?
I motion.
Jason, thank you.
Second.
Second, Nathan. Thank you. Okay. Our next order. Oh, sorry. Gotta do a roll call vote. Thank you, Jen.
George Bovee, Destiny Brown, Kim Carpenter Drake. Come back, Stephanie Davis.
Yes, sorry, there's this lag on my turning my mute off.
That's okay, thank you. Nathan Farner,
Yes.
Terry Frank,
Yes.
Amy Gilliland, Katie Goforth,
Yes.
Rebecca Henderson. In the email, she says she's approved the minutes. Andrea Hill, Holly Jones, Amy LeGrone. Lizette Lopez, Greg Lyles, Lee Moten, Patricia Powell,
Yes.
Jason Scott,
Yes.
Terry Silver,
Yes.
Tracy Vandevate, Amy Walter, Betty White,
Yes.
Eileen Wallem,
Yes.
Yvonne Wood,
Yes.
Suzanne Carr,
Yes.
LaShawn Dixon, DeShonta Gleaton,
Yes.
Adam Jarvis, Caroline Ledley, Marla Cartwright,
Yes.
Lieutenant Colonel Parker,
Yes.
Master Sergeant Regan,
Yes.
Esther Reyes, Nancy Shalene,
Yes.
and Jessica Youngblood. And the motion carries with 2 abstentions. Oh, yes, thank you, Amy, thank you.
All right. So, okay. Okay. Thank you, Jim. We're gonna just kind of give a brief overview of the work that the Memorandum of Understanding Committee has done so far. You have a copy of the draft in front of you and the folks online.
Yeah, for the folks online, 1 second, and I'll give you the direct link. Sorry, that's the internet's being a little bit slow in this room. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the folks online. Okay,
Second, is there a way to turn the owl down a little bit?
yes. I've done it through the.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just posted the direct link to this online for folks, in case you haven't had a chance to go to the commission member website, that's a direct link to that.
Thank you. So the purpose of this memorandum is to clarify the roles and responsibilities of Volunteer Tennessee and FNA. That's the role and the purpose of this particular document. So I'd like to get some feedback from the commission in terms of what we've done so far. I would also like to hear comments from the commission regarding whether or not we, as a commission, Volunteer Tennessee, begins to become more independent from FNA, or if you feel strongly that we still need to be connected to FNA the way we are now and address this at another time. I do need some clarification on the board about that, because I feel that we're kind of spinning our wheels with this memorandum of understanding, and I need the clarity because I'm chairing this committee right now. We didn't have anyone who's available, so. For clarity purposes, number one, comments on what you see so far and the changes we've made. And number two, what are your thoughts about how FNA is working with us now? And do we still need to think about becoming a little more independent as a commission? I'd like your thoughts and concerns from those two things, if you don't mind.
From a staffing standpoint, how, because I'm of course not as aware, but how is FNA working alongside with Volunteer Tennessee? Is this question asked?
So what are their roles right now, responsibilities? Adam, would you like to address that?
Sure. So at the moment, we are charged with providing administrative support and staff to the commission. we do that through 7 full-time positions, many of them, actually all of them here, 1 vacant at the moment. As well as other support through equipment, space, legal support if they have questions, financial support, which we've had a lot this week, contracting, et cetera. So all of those administrative functions that happen in a department or any organization, we provide those to Volunteer Tennessee in addition to the staff. That support this commission.
So historically, how did this come to be? Is it something that is need to continue because of historical purposes, or, and then especially given everything that we are experiencing right now, what is the feeling from the staff as with Volunteer Tennessee? The other side of that.
Well, the structure comes from the executive order. So that's where the structure comes from. Yeah.
I'm just seeking clarification, so.
Yeah. Would it be possible to give a summary or to like just catch people up with like where we're at with this and like what we're, you know, trying to decide here? Because like just on the surface, not knowing, I haven't been thinking much about this right now. So just kind of knowing where we're at. Yeah. Also just recognizing where we're at. You know, I think this conversation has been going on for a bit. And I appreciate where it's coming from. But Adam, you also kind of mentioned, like in this current context this week, like what kind of support may have been provided to Volunteer Tennessee and its team. I'm kind of interested in knowing, like, what kind of pros and cons come with this document or a certain direction versus maintaining connectivity. Because I do think it's important that when things like this happen, so both of our AmeriCorps programs were defunded. But because we are attached to the Knox County Community Action Committee, which provides support for our administrative functions, we have connection to resources and other things. So we were able to, you know, provide financial support for the next 9 weeks for all of our members that were exited, which mitigates significantly for the impacts of an event like that. If we were a totally autonomous agency, we may have just gone out of business. We may not have been able to pay payroll. I know that on the meeting we had with the group of directors, some people were asking about like how long they had to exit people under a 30-day rule. And I think what they were getting at is how long can we draw down funds from Volunteer Tennessee so we can pay the staff that we're totally reliant on this grant. That's now canceled. So in this circumstance, I see personally how being attached to a larger administrative entity is supportive of my staff and the people we're responsible for. So I'm just kind of curious how this may or may not shift that, or if it jeopardizes any of that stability. Because I want this commission, our work, to have autonomy, but I also want the people doing the work to be supported and have reassurance, because it's difficult to navigate moments like this unless you do have that. Because I know, like, these actions, I mean, some of the AmeriCorps programs that lost their funding won't be there when this figures itself out, right? Like, and by and large, those are probably going to be those that are operating more independently, are smaller, and just more vulnerable. While our organization, you know, we have lost our funding, so we're not getting any revenue from that. If there was an opportunity for revenue in the future, there'd still have to be, you know, maybe a gap, or maybe delays to the start of the next program year. But because of our attachment to a larger administrative entity, that entity can make decisions to support staff, so it's still there, so the capacity is maintained, while that might not potentially otherwise be available. So, you know, what supports the capacity at Volunteer Tennessee because I know they've been doing everything they can. They're literally the only people talking to us right now. There is zero communication from AmeriCorps. Besides Volunteer Tennessee, we're hearing a little bit from American Service Commissions and other entities, but by and large, Volunteer Tennessee is the most reliable resource for information in the service. Yeah, so I think it's critical that we maintain the staffing capacity so that it's here to help people work through this moment, but that it's also there because not all the programs are gone. There are still programs in operation, and there's a lot of stuff up in the air, and there could potentially be additional programs that are allowed to be funded based on any number of things related to law students or just all sorts of shenanigans. So, but if you don't support the capacity you have, I guess the question is, what are the implications?
Yeah, just, so the pros and cons you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adam, you said something about, I don't know your exact words, but like during the past week or support during the past week. I am totally ignorant of what has gone on. So can you explain that a little bit, or can you help everyone understand what's going on? I mean, we've received emails and I've seen on the news and whatever of programs not being funded and AmeriCorps members being called home or sent home and whatever, but in the whole picture of things and what FNA is doing to support that, I don't know.
Yeah. So let me first say, and as you said, Terry, thanks to Jim and team, they have been, and hearing what you just said about they're the ones that are communicating, it's not lost on me that the programs have been hit hard this week and y'all have been the ones standing there and doing that work and pushing those communications out. So truly thanks, not only sending the termination letters, but then getting on a call with those programs, I know is incredibly hard. So I want to say my thanks to the staff. In terms of like the support, Jim and I communicated a lot this week, I would say. I think that there will be additional support over the coming weeks as we start to formally terminate contracts that are in place with Volunteer Tennessee and those entities. And what that means is our Office of Business and Finance will do all of the procedural steps alongside Jim. You will have to initiate some of that work to terminate that arrangement. There'll obviously be some closeout procedures, much like any other activity where they are submitting their expenses. We will reconcile those. Jim and team, again, will be a big support of that. So we do view a lot of our support is through Jim and staff because they are FNA employees, but he has at his disposal our Office of Business and Finance, as well as our legal counsel, and then HR, which is a big part. And I agree with what you said, Jason. To me, personal opinion, being attached to a larger agency at times it definitely has its benefits. But I would say, Betty, this week, they have done most of the heavy lifting, all of the heavy lifting. We've been in contact with Jim and then also the governor's office on how, making sure that they're aware. And just to point out, Volunteer Tennessee is not the only federal program in the state that's obviously been impacted. It is not lost on us that it hurts and those cuts are there, but we have been asked from the governor's office to keep them aware of all of those federal implications. And so we've done that, lots of communication back and forth there and what those additional implications will mean as we start to unfold and unravel. And then maybe if it goes back too, as you said, what all that means as well. So I would say that's the majority of our support today.
Yeah, it's in my friend. Yeah, so FNA has been very helpful. Like other things that FNA has helped with is their communications person has helped us with communication stuff so that we make sure that we're communicating in a way that's consistent with the state administration, and helping us with that. So in terms of like where Volunteer Tennessee is, my opinion is that there's no cover for this. It would not have mattered where we were within state government for this federal action. Like Adam said, I mean, there's other like really big state departments that had massive amounts of grant funding cut. So in terms of, could we have, because we're with FNA, are we better protected in terms of the staff? Yes. Well, maybe. Yeah. Well, I think so. I think so. But in terms of what the commission can do about our current situation, I don't think there's any there's anything more that we could have done if it was a separate entity versus being attached to FNA. I don't think there's no difference there. I don't think you could have done anything more being separate.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, I think the commission, I know I'm a non-voting member, but I think you guys need to consider that if you were to break away and be separate, that would be a budget ask for all those things that Adam mentioned, of legal counsel, contracts folks, fiscal folks, HR staff. And that would be something you'd have to have funding separately and hire individual people instead of just being able to access their staff if this was a separate entity. And, you know, coming from a state agency, we can spread things around when we have large, you know, Office of General Counsel, things like that. But when you're talking about just one person, that's a big expense. So just a lot of costs to consider if it was to be independent.
I'll add, so I echo everything that's been said. I think from Jason's perspective, I agree. I feel like there have been some nice benefits that have come with being a part of FNA, especially in the situation we currently find ourselves in. Even prior, right? I mean, I think to your point, right? Yes, are there some responsibilities that come with privileges? Absolutely. But those privileges are there nonetheless. And I think from a practical standpoint, I agree with what was stated. I think the two being combined and the house within the other makes sense. The other caveat, though, the other half of that I would just say that hasn't been mentioned and pulling it back to the MOU is just the feasibility of it. We exist and are tied to FNA because of executive order. What would be required to change that would be executive order or legislative, both of which, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, on the executive order side, that would require support from the governor's office, which has been communicated at this moment in time, at least, is not there for that move. And I would argue on the legislative side, with our current political climate, I'll leave it at that. From a feasibility standpoint, even if that was something we were interested in, I just don't know how practical at this moment in time it's even worth having that conversation. I don't think the path has been laid for us to do that and to do it effectively. So my desire, and I'm not on the MOU team, but my desire through the MOU is simply to get a better understanding. What I hope this says, I'm not read all the way through it in deep detail, is just greater clarity around operational support roles and responsibilities. And that's it. Who is responsible for this? Who is responsible for that? To make sure that the two teams are playing well together, but in no way is attempting to divorce. That would not be my desire.
Thank you for saying that. 'Cause it's exactly what I was trying to say and portray. So that's where I was getting to as far as the executive order and then what the process would be if you did decide to separate the two entities. But I also, as Adam said, want to commend you all. I know it's been a lot that you all have had to deal with over the last couple of weeks. And I know a lot of the staff are suffering, unfortunately. And people are doing amazing work of just trying to keep afloat. And I know, as I mentioned to several of you all, who our office was affected, my office specifically, I lost all my staff and it was affected immediately. So there are opportunities though, and one thing that I found out though, being with the state agency, is that we were able to have some funding and I was able to hire back 3 of my staff on Monday. But that's because I'm part of a larger system versus just being in my office. And so I think there comes those benefits as we talked about. But those benefits do come with some responsibilities. And so we have to ensure that the work continues on. And so I'm in agreement. I know I'm not a voting member, but definitely in agreement with what's been stated and staying together right now, because I think we work together better than we do apart.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anyone online have any comments to this discussion? Does Eileen have her hand up?
You're
Yeah.
muted.
Yeah, I did have my hand up. I agree pretty much with what everybody's been saying. I think there's a great benefit in staying attached to FNA, especially, during these times. Also, we would have to think of if we were to try and go independent, we would have to think about the work that would entail and who has the time to do that work. And the cost, of course. So I would be in favor of staying with FNA. I do have a couple of nitpicky things with the memorandum. Is this a memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding? Because the title at the top of the page says memorandum of agreement, and the paragraph under purpose calls it a memorandum of understanding. So I don't know if there's a difference between those two things, but we ought to pick one and stick with it.
Thank you, Eileen.
We understand and agree.
That's the editor speaking. The other thing is that I was looking at the responsibilities of the chair, and there are some responsibilities in that section that I don't think to my knowledge and experience during and having been a chair of a committee, the items that say appoint all committee chairs, assist all chairs in the planning of committee activities, and supervise all chairs as to the management of committee plans. I don't know if it makes a difference that this is in the document, but it's been a lot more loosey-goosey than that. Different commission chairs have, different amounts of let's say engagement with the actual committees and the committee chairs. So I don't know if having these bullet points in this document will be adding a lot of work to the commission chair's workload.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So-
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say to her point, I believe those were a direct pull, and I think Sarah's online from the executive order. So we tried to stay consistent with what the chair's responsibilities are called out in the executive order and why they're listed this way here.
Did you hear that, Eileen?
I did hear that.
Okay. So
For some reason, it never jumped out at me from the executive order. I don't know why.
Okay. Thank you, Betty.
Now, my question is, are we now moving to discuss now, did we decide we're going to call it a memorandum of agreement?
Of agreement.
Okay,
That's
so we've changed that. And then, have we decided to go ahead and discuss that now? As opposed to general consensus whether we should?
I was going to say something, but we went ahead and went into the document, which thank you, Eileen, your edits were on point. I think what I'm hearing from the board, and I want to make sure I'm hearing everyone, is that we're going to remain attached to FNA and that this committee is committed to clarifying the roles and responsibilities of both entities moving forward. Yes.
Madam Chair, can I add, you made a comment about spinning our wheels a bit. And I wanted to say, it feels like part of some of the members' intent is maybe to address what you wanted to discuss, which was to use this MOU to seek independence or to remain. So I think it's good that we've had this discussion, and it seems like there's consensus that the intent, and I should verify that this MOA cannot make an independent agency. So that it's important. We weren't going in with that intent. So it's good that we are now level setting and understand that this is for those roles and responsibilities and how we work together. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Okay, hearing no other comments, then yes, Betty, we're looking at the document itself, and if there's any comments as to the changes that have been made thus far or anything that's been added, you can see the comments on the left side of your page, things that we've talked about and have been dealing with. Please.
It's just so everyone understands, the committee that's working on this hasn't finished. So this is not a finished document that's being presented to you all to approve or not approve. It's just, I think Terry just wanted to get people's input on it
Yes.
now that the committee has been working on it a couple meetings and has gotten through some of it.
Yeah, I wanted feedback. So, because I really want to move this forward and complete it, and I needed to hear some feedback. As to
So
your thoughts.
regarding that 3.4,
3.4,
what was previously discussed, because it's in executive order, do we need to keep that wording, or could you add something to say, like, you know, to the extent necessary? Because the purpose of the document is to define what FNA is going to do compared to what the commission's going to do, right? So, so what this is doing is just taking this set of tasks off the plate of FNA, right? So, but like was mentioned, you don't necessarily have to do all of these things in order for the committees to be effective. So would you be able to just add some wording to that to say, you know,
as
to the
needed.
extent as needed or necessary or something like that, would be appropriate or allowed?
It would be, and if I remember correctly, the MOU committee had discussions about whether or not to include this language because it is in the executive order. But I think the general consensus from the committee was to leave it in because it's just spelling out what the responsibilities are of the chair, even though they're in the executive order. But for the purposes of this, to spell that out. And that was kind of the general consensus of the committee.
I remember too.
Yeah.
But Katie, to your point, this year I appointed all chairs that I knew could do it, didn't need my help. But always available, and I want to make that clear, always available if, you know, and I try to attend as many of those meetings as I can. So, thank you. Any other comments on the MOA?
Can I ask, and this may be an add-on question, so in section 4.8, which is where it lists like all the individual positions, and it says at the time of this description, blah, 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 is there any provisions in here, and it may be in here, and I'm just not read that part. Should any of those change? Do we have to go back and readjust the memo every time if there happens to be like an actual position change, or is there like, does that make sense, what I'm asking?
I think so. I'll try to take a stab at it this way. We listed them as their job classifications. So in state government, in the HR space, you have a staffing pattern. So these 7 positions, and that's why we clarified these position numbers, are assigned to Volunteer Tennessee. So regardless of the individual that fills that seat, these are the 7 that Volunteer Tennessee has.
Okay.
Does that answer your?
So kind of, it's not, that's helpful. Let's say one of those positions, the actual line itself was to go away at some point, or we were to add one at some point, it's gonna be 2 years down the road. Does that require a new memo?
I think it would, a revised memo
Okay.
would be
That
best
was
to
just,
add
that was the
them.
question.
Yeah, or, I mean, even if, you know, Jim were to be reclassed to an FNA program director 3, we would probably add that to the list to update at some point. I don't know that it would be burning or urgent because it doesn't change the structural operations of what we're agreeing to do. But when we go in next to do a cleanup, I think it would be appropriate to make sure that those positions are still the correct positions. This was, if I can, this was also our attempt to show, because I know there's been questions for what staff are being provided to the commission, from FNA. So these are the 7 dedicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the 7 full-time positions that are assigned to assist the commission.
And if I could say one thing, I think to clarify for people who were not like part of this discussion, because I was a little fuzzy about a lot of it before. But to me, this is the attempt of FNA to show us that these are things we will have, rather than just say, we'll provide support staff or we'll provide a director. So that could be 2 people, or it could be 7 people, you know, or we'll provide technology. So that could be just like, maybe we don't need this. We can take all this away. So I think it was trying to ensure Volunteer Tennessee that we have these specific things that FNA is going to give us to support us. Is that understanding? Is that what Ed?
I was gonna add, it is our commitment and our intent to better document what administrative support means. So here's what that means in terms of what we are gonna provide.
Don?
Can I just toss something into, is that my position is not listed on here because I'm a volunteer position. Yeah, Manager Disaster Volunteer Services may be the official title, and that is the state service coordinators. And within that, description, but it is currently a volunteer position. There, as I understand it, there is no funding available to make that a full-time position. Would love to retire someday. Would love to see it become a full-time position. Would love to go play golf with my wife someday. So if just plant that seed.
Thank you.
That would make it happen. I appreciate all you do.
And it's a labor of love.
Any other comments from anyone? We will do our best to get through this agreement in 2 meetings. That's what I promised, and I appreciate your feedback. I really appreciate you guys sharing your opinions on this and where we are as a board. Okay. Okay, if there's nothing else at this time, we'll set this aside and we'll continue to be diligent with this agreement and hopefully bring something to you soon. Okay. We're going to move forward with our business. Okay, yeah, right here. Okay. All right, so we have had the most amazing person help us kind of clarify our goals for the state service plan. And so I'm going to call on Kim Carpenter Drake to share a brief overview of what this group has done and the goals that they have come up with. Kim Carpenter Drake.
Yeah, I'm here. Just struggling with my delay and my mute turning off. Yeah, it's been a really interesting experience to work through the committee chairs and committee members and with Jim and with Terry on this. The important thing that I think we've addressed in our process was one of the things I usually tell a group if I'm working with them on strategic planning is start with the question of whether you want to tweak an existing plan. Is that the season that you're in? Is it 3% more of this, 2% less of that? Or are you in a space where you can back up a little bit more to the macro level and really think about how your strategy helps to guide the work forward? And we ended up really taking the second of the 2 approaches, which I think was really timely, even more so than I believe we anticipated when we started this, and asked ourselves a couple of key questions. One of those questions was, what is within our control? So there is a difference between the things that we would like to see happen in the world and the things that we are charged to do as individuals, as organizations, as committees, as commissions. So having a little more clarity of what is within our scope and our capacity. So for example, we can feel very strongly about the importance of food security in our state. Does Volunteer Tennessee have the acumen and the resources for that to be one of our goals? Well, not really. What we can do is part of our theory of change is that we believe that the active and successful involvement of volunteers across the state helps to support success in activities like that. So the activity that belongs to us is building and supporting a robust network of volunteers in a variety of different ways. The second thing that we addressed was asking the question of how our goal areas, our core areas of work, aligned with the workers getting it done. So did and do our committees align with the highest and best use of those resources with the activities that we want to accomplish. And so I think that the committee chairs can speak to that much better than I can. But what I heard was it can be somewhat confusing when we have a goal area that has maybe 2 or 3 committees that all contribute to that. And it can easily turn into, I thought that one was yours. Oh, I thought that one was yours. So if we have clarity around who is responsible for each piece of work and organize the work so that they align with the committee structure, that can help us to be much more focused and successful. So part of the suggestion that this group is making in this draft that we're sharing is not only that we have a higher level of clarity around the work that belongs to us as a group, but also it will come with some recommendations of how to align the committees to best serve that work.
Thank you. Thank you for your work, and thank you, chairs, and those folks who joined the chairs at the last meeting to come up with these goals. And I think, Kim, it leads us into this conversation. How does our present committee structure align with these goals? And do we need to make some changes to our committee structure?
Yeah, I think Eileen had some good thoughts about that. Other people did as well. I know Nathan had some good suggestions with it, but I think Eileen's role was a great example of the grants committee's alignment with when and how we used resources during the year. My recommendation as we have this conversation is that if these feel like the 4 big buckets of work, if we have consensus that these are the areas that require our time, talent, and treasure, that we consider realigning our committees to better match those. And I think our current committee chairs had some suggestions of how to do that.
Okay. Let's see. Eileen, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Sure. Excuse me if I start coughing. The grants committee, as you all know, is very, very small. And we've just lost one other person, and one of our people is an ex officio member on the commission, so non-voting member. And so it's difficult for us to make the suggestions, let's say, about which funding scenarios should be presented to the board, because there's really not enough of us to get a good view or sense of how different people feel about it. So I'm all for merging grants with another committee. But I'm really not for, there had been some talk about grants being an ad hoc committee to just convene as needed. And I'm leaning towards not supporting that, because for one thing, there are things that grants has to decide all during the year, not just during grant season. That's number one. And number two is it takes a while to learn the details of the funding process well enough to be able to participate in the grants committee really well. If somebody is new to joining the grants committee, there are a lot of questions and a lot of education that has to happen. And for an ad hoc committee, pull people in as they're needed, I don't think that would work really well. I think we really do need people who are gonna stick with it for, several years at least. So, so that's kind of how I feel about that. With regard to realigning the committees, I actually think that's a good idea because there is a lot of confusion about which committee is responsible for which goal, and very often there's 4 committees that end up being responsible for that. And the committees are not always clear on what should they be doing about that. So, yeah, I better stop before I start coughing again. That's it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm kind of
Patricia?
kind of wondering if it would be better to be a subcommittee of something. Cause like, what I did learn with the grants committee, I think a big part of being on a committee is you always want to be prepared for like whatever's given to you. And I know that you can only be prepared so much, but I'm wondering if that's a regular thing. Like if that had been something that like documents prepared, like everything prior to, mind you, I could miss stuff of just like how much email or different things, but I guess it's part of that is the question is when anybody gets onto any of the committees, are they given any kind of preparation documents to start off with? Because I remember when I first joined the retreat, or like when I went to the first retreat, whenever that was, and we were going over not the state plan, whatever the document was we were going over. I misunderstood what we were doing. I thought we were going through it and like looking for grammar or different things of how it was supposed to be, not doing something else. And so I think part of the question is, or part of the thing is, does everybody actually know what they're supposed to do in the committee, and do they have the information to do that? And so that's what I would ask, like across every committee of like, cause that's part of, is everybody clear on their role for each thing?
Great comments from both. And I would like to say this, we're starting a new state service plan, so we can actually address that and say, okay, if it's going to be called communication strategic partnership that handles number 3, then these are the things that we're committed to. These are the things we're going to focus on. And here's what being a committee member of this particular committee means. Attending, discussing, being available for the roadshow, just different ways that way. So we're starting right now new, and we can do that. Nathan?
And to piggyback on that comment, just to make sure that we memorialize it in the board handbook.
Memorialize it.
So being in these conversations with this small team, looking at the state service plan, we spent a lot of time talking about committees because in theory, they're the ones that are supposed to be driving the plan, right? Actually identifying goals to go with the individual areas. One of the philosophies that was floated in that, not saying this has to be the direction, but an idea that may be a differ from our previous or our current model. It seems like our current model's committee structure is based around tasks, grants, communications, partner development, that sort of thing. It's very much focused around tasks, which sounds great. I think on paper, the problem being is when you talk about the programs and initiatives of the commission, almost all of those tasks touch all of the programs. So I think that led to a great amount of, or a lack of, I guess, clarity around who really is supposed to be owning what. And when people don't know who owns it, guess what? Nobody knows that, right? So it's like when you talk about communications, that's everything. Communications touches everything. When you talk about strategic partnerships, are you partnering with nonprofits? Are you partnering with corporate partners? Are you partnering with volunteers directly? Because they're all partners in the work. What does that really mean, right? So one of the ideas that was floated is perhaps as we're thinking through committee models and how it aligns with the service plan is thinking through perhaps more audience or constituencies and less around the specific task, right? Because when you talk about this idea of at the most foundational level, we want to increase volunteerism and service across the state, right? Your audience in that particular task, to some extent, is actually the people you want to volunteer. It's your service members, right? That is an audience, and the strategies and the mechanisms by which you would target and address that audience is a little bit more niche, is a little bit more manageable. I think about the Tennessee Service Network. I think about some of those things. When you talk about support for agencies and nonprofit partners, the people that would be hosting volunteers, I think more about the conference. And I think more about professional development opportunities and communication strategies, things like that. When I think about entities that perhaps are helping to fund or raise awareness, then I think about our corporate partners, right? So perhaps being able to think through it in the buckets of who are the constituencies, because I think some of our programs and initiatives are aligned more in that model than what our committees are. So it's like you have a committee structure that doesn't align with the program structure, and then they're just kind of rubbing against one another. And then one of those constituencies is us, right? Which is when you start talking about your board development, and it is us as commissioners, it's us as the Volunteer Tennessee staff. That is a constituency in and of itself. So you could still have that kind of a board development, board growth. But that was something that came up in the conversations that I think is very different than our current model, but I feel like addresses some of the rub.
So what would that look like? Can you flesh that out?
I have no idea, Terry.
Okay.
I think to some extent, even looking a little bit on when you think about these broad goals, and again, we could wordsmith these, right? But building capacity for volunteer success. When you think about capacity from my lens, I don't think about the volunteers themselves. I'm thinking about the agencies that are hosting them. They're the ones that need greater capacity, whether that be resources, whether that be spots, whether that be support. When I think about actually getting more volunteers, right? So to some extent, kind of what's on the screen is almost some buckets, right? That if you were to view number one as the people, you want more people volunteering. Bucket number two, a little bit as the support for the entities that need volunteers. That's your AmeriCorps programs, that are your nonprofit agencies, perhaps, or other entities, your schools, that sort of thing. And then maybe the third one, a little bit, I mean, corporate's mentioned in here, community engagement, story collection, sponsorships. Perhaps that could be fleshed a little bit more, but it kind of resembles what's on the screen to me a little bit. Maybe with some wordsmithing. What's not on the screen, actually it is, I think it's number 4, your fourth constituency, which is us, right? How are we as the commission growing and doing better and taking ownership of these things, right? So that came out in the conversation. I think that could be fleshed a little bit more, but I do think it's different than our current
model.
Yes, Jason.
Yeah, this is Jason. Just a comment. I appreciate that this document, you can kind of sit down with a general understanding of what this is. You can look at it. It kind of makes sense, you know? When you talk about constituency, when you started talking about that, it's like, oh yeah, you know, this can be, you know, kind of more focused on members or volunteers. This can be more focused on organizations and their capacity, or community partners that are adjacent, or the internal focus. And I think just coming into this space, I think the clarity of that, like maybe orienting in that way, is a bit more intuitive. Because I know the first 3 years that I was in this space, every time we would go through the state plan, I always felt like, doing this right? It would take me half the time just to be like, years. But I think this has an intuitiveness that kind of really speaks towards the thing that we all commonly are doing and organizes it in a meaningful way. And I like the idea of constituents. Just comments.
And even to that point, what I like about that is the fact that it should be anybody who reads the document should understand it.
Yes.
Regardless of whether you've actually know anything about Volunteer Tennessee or not. And so that was my issue with the retreat of like, I know some things because of other stuff that I've been involved in or with, but it's just like, it literally should be the most basic thing. So the question is then, committee-wide for all that stuff, whenever you're giving out a document, can anybody understand this, even if they've never like done any type of work in this field or whatever you want to call it?
Well, one thing that I think, and this just came to mind as I'm looking at this, that this may also help with a little bit is, I feel like, and I've seen this even like my year this is year 2 for me on the commission. Year 1 on the commission is I felt like there was a lot of time stepping into the role on the committee and really trying to understand what the committee itself is supposed to do. And I, as a commissioner, am supposed to do, right? So I feel like a lot of times, and it's not, I'm guilty of this as well, right? We as commissioners will come into that meeting, we do what we need to, we run through the agenda, vote on the things that we need to, we get some updates. Okay, great, see you next month. We didn't really do anything, right? We just shared information of the things the staff had done, right? And obviously staff, they're here and they're being paid to execute some of these things and to lead these initiatives and programs. But where I think we as commissioners could be more engaged is around innovation and ideas and strategic planning. And I feel like if you're in this bucket, so let's say I'm on a committee that, I don't know what it's called, but it's somehow focused on volunteers and service members themselves, not where they're serving, but they themselves, being able to sit around the table and say, how can we better support volunteer and service members? That is actually a topic and a question that you could brainstorm and be innovative and create new programs around. And we're not just kind of rubber stamping things, right? Like you have a very specific task. How do you better support our partners? How do you better support volunteers? We can work with that, right? I can come into that room and go, well, here's an idea. Here's an idea. I don't quite feel like culturally that's how we operate, because when I think about communications committee, which is the committee I've been on at the very beginning, it's like we came in, we communicated all the things. Okay, well, we're done, right? It's like, how do you communicate? We're not having that conversation, right? So I feel like this leans to that a little bit.
Thank you.
I think this is Jason. I think some strategic planning processes that I've been a part of in the past will like conceive a person or an audience that like, okay, this is the person we're planning for. This is the type of circumstance we're planning for, and having that kind of person or entity or focus in mind, I think really helps people just kind of be like, okay, I'm planning something for AmeriCorps members, and if maybe I'm coming into this from that background, maybe that's something that's meaningful. Or if I'm coming into this someone who's really invested in relationships with partners, I know that kind of like this is a mode of thinking and I'm applying it to this audience. And so I can, to your point, be more creative and innovative as opposed to like identifying tasks. And I think that's a really good space for the board, who I think generally is operating on a more strategic, conceptual level, and tasks are more broadly either implemented by more board members that have time, or if not, it just becomes the staff's body of work, right? So just trying to do that.
I would love if we could come up, whatever the model is, if we could come up with a model that addresses some of the cultural challenges, right? Like, how can we create a model that allows commission members with capacity to do more and be more engaged without just, here's a wonderful idea. Okay, Candace, can you go do it? Right, like that's not good for Candace, right? I don't want to do that, right? So how can we create a model that solves that a little bit? Yeah.
Are we able to create, is committees, is that still a word to use, or is there a better way to use what? Teams around these 4 major categories. Yes.
In place of the committees of America?
Yes. Just a thought. Just a thought.
I mean, generally speaking, it's a word, right? But in terms of what you're saying about changing the culture and spirit, maybe we do that as opposed to like committee and team. And these is generally, because there's already bullets on them, and maybe that's what takes massaging. But if we could, also, there's only 4 of them.
Yes.
So instead of having like Eileen by herself, or, like as a voting member, or like board development, maybe you have 3 members and then you have 1 member, and then it's just like, but if you have these kind of like 4 focused areas, I think it would be easier to keep people in them. And then like within that, just understanding like, what are we going to focus on? I would be supportive of the use of the word teams. And this general.
It implies people working together.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and a potential idea, kind of junior league aspect, you could also just rotate. You could have people to where it's like, they can only serve on a committee or a team. Like, it depends on what your function is for that, but team or committee, it could mean a different thing. So there is actually something behind whether you say committee or team, and that's gonna try to go with that. But you could start changing it into, you can serve on this, whatever you wanna call it, for however many terms or like years, whatever. And then after that, you need to go to a different one so that everybody, there's I don't know, it'd be fairness, but that's so maybe all the people can learn new skills, whatever it is. But that way you don't come into these issues where it's, you only have so many people on this committee, team, all that. And so that way it keeps everything fresh too. Because then you bring new people in, all that stuff, because if there's a constant rotation after so much time, you're then able to do other things, get other perspectives, all that stuff. So that could be an idea.
Okay. Evan?
So I do like the idea. I was just gonna add, as the other ad hoc member on the grants, if we did that model for grants, I feel like we would be in trouble right now because Elaine is the sole member that really is carrying the weight of that group outside of the staff. So I've been there 2 years and I'm trying to figure it out a bit. And without the staff's help and now Elaine, it would be difficult. So I would hate for, I don't know how long she's been on that committee, but if we rotate her out, then we're losing a lot of subject matter expertise in that particular area. And that grants, I mean, Jim, you can speak to this, but that particular area, we moved through it pretty quickly on this agenda, but I know we spend a lot of time in those grants committees, really get into the nitty gritty. And then the staff prepares several different funding options and mixes for us that we then ask questions on. So without that environment dynamic, I worry about how we would push some of those. I think we would then be spending more time discussing grants in a full commission meeting, which maybe we all want. But I feel like we filter some of that work out in the grants committee before it gets to this committee so that we have more time for other agenda items. It's just a point I wanted to raise.
I wonder if there's value in, I agree with that. I feel like there's something to be said about some expert knowledge, whether it be because you've been on that committee for a long time or because it's your day job, right? Like let's say we go for these buckets of people, agencies, partners, internal, right? Those are your constituencies, whatever we call them. Some people, their day jobs, by the nature of what they're doing, naturally falls into that, right? If you are a nonprofit professional, being able to think through the capacity building for other nonprofits and agencies, like you're able to bring your personal expertise into the conversation. So I do think there's value in letting people kind of find their home. But at the same time, I think with Patricia's comment, I also question this idea that everybody has to have a home and you can only have one home and homes can't cross lines, like that's self-imposed. Like nobody says that that's how you have to operate. Now, obviously you have to have some level of structure, but perhaps we're not gonna figure this out today, but down the road, we could explore, is there a way to better create this to where if I do want to engage with this other committee because they're working on a really cool project, I don't feel as though I'm not allowed to because I'm on communications, right? Like I have something to offer to the conference and I want to be like, hey, Candace, like, can I help with that? Because I love that. Candace looked at her, so what are you talking about? But there could be some soft flexibility. So maybe there's a way, and again, it goes back to that cultural piece, is there a way to encourage people to use their skills and not feel like they're in this little box and bubble? You're going to have a home formally, but that doesn't mean you don't have skills and assets that could be better utilized in other places.
Good point. Jim?
Yeah, so I'll say, I agree with everything that's been said, and particularly like the expertise part is hard and takes time to develop. So I wouldn't recommend that you just rotate people just to rotate people, because the other part of that is that people will often find where they feel the most comfortable, either based on their personal interest or their professional interest. I mean, we have had people come in and like their day job is communications. They're like, I do not want to be on communications. I do that all day long. I would rather be on one of these other committees. And I would rather be on grants. So I think it's important to let people go to where they feel like they're being most effective. I think the challenge for the commission to think about is when the committees get out of balance, how do we rebalance those committees in a way that doesn't force people to do things they don't want to do, but make sure that the commission is doing the things that it needs to do through its committee structure. And I think that's where we kind of have run into problems lately. Is like we had great people serving on all the different committees, and we had some changeover, and then all of a sudden we had 2 people on the grants committee. And that, I mean, that's not anybody's fault. That's just what happened. But the commission, I think, as a body, needs to think about how to do that restructuring or reforming when those situations arise, rather than just potentially leaving it up to the chair to figure out, because that's kind of what has happened in the past when we've had committees get kind of out of whack. The chair steps in and asks people to move around. I think it may be more of a team effort to figure those things out. Maybe I don't know.
I think a part of it though, because you can take all these little ideas and merge them together in a different way, because whether you add the rotation to that or not, like you could keep grants separate. I'm just thinking that with how big Volunteer Tennessee, like the commission itself is, there should be a way to get to say, you know what, we need you over here. So sometimes you kind of have to push people out of their comfort zone to say, hey, if we want to get this done, because I keep thinking about this, like, what are the numbers of the committees? Like, how many is on each committee? Maybe you do need to start putting up, we have a max. Once we've hit that max, we need to look to others, because otherwise you're going to keep being in these issues if people are like, no, I don't want to go there. And so, because I'm just thinking, like, do we know if everybody's talents are being used? Do we know if everybody is actually on a committee, all of this stuff, and how often they're actually meeting, all of those things? So maybe that's data you need to look at. But I'm just thinking that with every single person, there shouldn't be a reason why the grants committee just doesn't have very many people when you've got so many other commissioners. So that's just other stuff to consider too.
It's Kim. I have a comment question. I feel like maybe we're talking about 2 different things right now, and I'm wondering if it would help to separate them or take them in sequence. It feels like maybe we're not talking so much about the strategic goal areas as we're talking about committee structure and committee process. I just wanted to call that out. I know Terry said, can we try to stay focused on things? And I feel like maybe we slid sideways a little bit, and they're both important conversations. Just, I think they're maybe 2 different ones. Identifying the core areas of work we need to do, I think, is one piece of work, and then how to process it from a membership perspective is a second one.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing for you all to be thinking about as you look at this is what the next step is. Because the next step is, if we follow the process that's been kind of laid out in terms of our state service plan timeline, would be to take whatever comes out of today and then go out and start getting public input on that. And specifically to ask people in the communities, based on your communities and, what Volunteer Tennessee has as its resources, what would this maybe look like in your community? Like what would Volunteer Tennessee do related to these things in your community? So having something that is ready to go and go out and get that feedback is the next step.
So the question is, how does the commission feel about our core areas of work? And can we say that these are our core areas of work and these are the areas we're going to be committed to? Yes, Adam.
This is maybe a loaded question. I like this. I like the layout. Do we see any landmines in the current political environment? Is there any wording on here that needs to be massaged or changed, or is any of this going to get us targeted more?
Good question. It is loaded.
Don't think so. I don't, because it's pretty generic.
Yeah, volunteer placement, I don't think should be super like.
Yeah, but yeah, well, yeah, I don't think, yeah, I don't think any of this would be kind of red flags to anybody.
Is there another word we can use for placement?
Oh, I was making an example of like,
Oh, just.
I don't think it should be like a red flag. to anybody,
All right, okay, okay.
I'm not sure what's red
Okay.
flags anymore.
Okay.
None of the terms that we have seen as being kind of spotlighted as being problematic terms are on this list. And that wasn't intentional. This is just kind of what fell out of the workings of the committee chairs in kind of developing this framework. And just from a perspective anyway. So yeah, I think the language here is probably more than okay. I think it's probably good related to all that.
Is there any area that we're missing here? And I'm sorry, Donna, I didn't see your hand.
Just a suggestion, maybe we find out if other service commissions have already gone through this process, recreate the wheel and see if they have broken it down into comparable areas, just to see if we're missing anything or if there's some language there that jumps out to us that might better fit what we're trying to accomplish.
Eileen also has her hand up online.
Okay, Eileen?
Yes, I was just wondering if it might help these categories seem more real to us, is if we attached some of our existing programs. So let's say Governor Stars Awards, the conference, site visits, if we attach those and to see, like which of these buckets would they fall in? To just see how that, how that balances out, or are there ones where we're saying, gee, we're really not sure it would, fall under this and this. Just a thought.
Okay. Yes, yes.
I think, not to take us off the track of the conversation, but I kind of understand how we got into it with the board, because going back to, I like Nathan's suggestion for the identifying the constituencies, like especially, so I think that could be a way to rewrite this that would maybe be like more plain to the public. Because like building capacity for volunteer success, I mean, that's not like what, yeah, everybody might not know. I mean,
okay.
Can I ask just a clarifying
Yeah.
question?
Mhm.
So when we solicit, this will be my first, I wasn't here 3 years, this is my first round doing this. So when we solicit this feedback from partners in the general public who never maybe offering feedback outside of the commission, what does that actually look like? Because that might inform where I'm at currently. Like, are we giving them a document and then here's a survey link? Are we, what does that physically, what does that process look like? Because part of me says like, I think these are the buckets, is what I'm hearing. This is also pretty minimal. Like, there's not a lot to respond to, right? So I'm trying to think through, like, does there need to be a bit more narrative? Or like, what are they getting and what are they responding to? Is it this document?
But so, yes, but with some prompter questions. So, what we would do is we would collect both, survey responses for people who can't participate in one of the roadshow things. And, kind of, for those of you who haven't been participating in the communications committee, that committee has talked about doing a roadshow, and part of it would be, at least for this, the the earliest ones, the first ones coming up in the summer, would include a component to capture feedback from the public that shows up in person from those road shows to give input on the state plan. So the survey part would be a survey with these goals, but with prompter questions after them. The in-person, what we've done in the past, and it depends a little bit on how many people show up, but essentially you break people up into groups and you say within that group, each person generates a list of things that they think would fit within the, under each one. And then as a group, they share and they kind of pick out the ones that they think are the strongest. And then all the groups kind of share their strongest points. And then those get kind of collected as the feedback from that particular in-person meeting. So it's like an individual, small group, big group work. I mean, that's how we've done it in the past. I mean, we certainly do it some other way, but that seems pretty effective to be able to get people to, like, they have to think about it individually first and then do that small group work and then the big group work to kind of refine things.
That's helpful. Thank you. No, I think that's what I envisioned in my head. Just want to make sure that wasn't way off base. Part of me, I like this. If it was me, I would probably, if I was responding to this, if I'm a partner, I'm a volunteer, I'm whomever I might be. I think because it's just very vague bullet points, I feel like there's a lack of clarity. I think it's to Lizzie's point a little bit. I do think maybe there's an opportunity for this to be a tad bit more narrative. We're not trying to give people a novel, because we also want them to read it and respond to it. But it's like, even within, like, it's a couple of sentences or a paragraph. When we say supporting a robust network of volunteers and service learners, then we listed these things. Can we turn that into a little bit more? Like when I say award programs, what does that mean? We want to recognize and uplift exemplary volunteers across the state. Like, for me, that means something, right? Like, that means something besides awards program. What does that mean? Right? We want to recognize exemplary volunteers across the state. Like, that is a very specific, oh, okay, how can they do that, right? So if there's a way to just maybe give a little bit more meat to each of these, but I like the buckets.
Okay. It sounds as though we're all liking this. What it sounds like we still need to do is to attach our current programs, what we've got going on now, see where they would fit under these buckets, as we're calling them. We need to put a little bit more narrative to explain each area. And I see that where we go back in and look at what our committee structure is now and the goal or the vision of each committee, how that would fit here. But I also think then we need to think about how we can make our committees equitable. And so that we've got a good amount of, or if we're not going to call them committees, maybe teams. Make sure that we've got enough people on the teams to address the areas that they're focused on. Is that what I'm hearing? Does that sound right? Okay, so first of all, we need to have a core group of people who are going to be willing to work with this document and do, as I just talked about before, and come back with some recommendations for teams for the areas. Because I don't think we're going to do that today. But I don't want to say, okay, we've talked about that, now let's go to something else. I want to have action steps now.
Does that fit our timeline, Jim? Or what does that mean? Because I know we all need to.
Yeah.
Get it out.
Yeah. So to do that, because I think what Terry's talking about is what's the structure going to be underneath once we have a plan? And so how does the commission want to organize its committees? I think it's fine for that discussion to go on in parallel with the discussion about the state plan goals and getting public input. Because I think what we have here, if everybody agrees to these kind of big picture 4 goals, we can get public input on that. And especially if we add a little bit more descriptive stuff like you're suggesting for some of the bullet points underneath, that's enough for us to go get public input. Okay. So we can get the public input and then bring that back to you all at the August meeting. In addition to have between now and August, having the committees also do additional work on this to kind of flesh things out a little bit more in terms, because right now it's just it's very, very big picture. Like, what are the actual goals gonna be that the commission wants to achieve in the next 3-year period? Those need to be refined a little bit. So, but that can come from the public input and then the individual committee meetings that happen between now and this meeting. And then we can kind of pull all that together. And from there, I think the commission should be able to, at the August meeting, be able to develop a really solid first draft of the plan.
Is there a way for, and this may be in the process already, is there a way for you and your team to also be able to respond to this?
Sure.
The ones who have to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, I mean, it's the ones that physically have to get the program off the ground, there would be some, I think it'd be helpful as part of the, to get you and your team's input as well.
Yeah.
Capacity.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so the question is, do we want to continue to work with the chairs and kind of continue to meet to do the things that we've talked about here and make some recommendations for the teams themselves? Or do we want to have a whole new group?
When you say the chairs, you're talking about the people that were already on.
That were
got-
meeting
came up with this
with
document.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sure.
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 I don't want to lose this question here.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Speak for all the chairs.
Eileen has a hand up.
Yes, Eileen.
I think it would be good to, include the people that have been I guess the ad hoc team that's been working on this, for those people to continue because they've got some, memory of thought processes, and I'm definitely willing to continue on that effort.
And if there's anyone else that feels passionate about this that wants to join, that's definitely an okay thing to do. Okay, so is there anything else that we need to discuss in terms of the state plan and our core areas of work and committee structure?
So I'll add this.
Okay.
Yes and no. What you just asked, no. Is it go with this? I don't know, but I want to put it with it. Two things. One is, I think as we have this conversation, whether it be this small team or this largely, and we get into the weeds of all of this, I think keeping in mind that the landscape in which we developed this is a different landscape than what it is today.
And maybe tomorrow.
And tomorrow, and maybe 5 different times between now and Christmas. So I think keeping in mind, I think that's just really important context. I mean, it doesn't mean, I love this the way that it is, but I think it's really, really, really important to just keep in mind that the climate that we're in and the ways in which things are rapidly changing. So the ways in which we may want to structure something today may be obsolete in January. So I think it's important that as we're having these conversations, we're also having those conversations. So that's the first item, is just guidance to myself and probably the group. The second item is kind of state service plan structure and kind of just its own thing because it's new. Is there value, this is me saying I think there's value, but I'll throw it out. Is there value in there being a more intentional conversation? I don't know whether that's at a commission meeting, whether that's the executive committee, whether that's some other entity of people around having those conversations about should worst case scenario next year, we're in worse shape than we are currently, what that looks like. Because I know right now we're moving forward under the current model. Let's say that model changes again. I think the last week and a half, all of you all have kind of flown by the seat of your pants and just had to kind of figure it out. We weren't prepared for it because it was so unprecedented. Should though, I mean, I'll just be blunt, should the very real reality, let's say AmeriCorps doesn't exist next year. I'll be the person that I want us to be thoughtful about that, not naive, that is not in the realm of impossibilities. Who is planning? How does that impact all of our programs? How does that impact our staff at the commission? How does that impact the people they're serving? This year, we just kind of had to deal with it because it hit us like a ton of bricks. But now that it's happened, I feel like I don't want us to be naive that it could and likely could happen again. So where's that conversation happening? So that's my question, is I just don't know where that conversation is. Because I know we can't do it today. Obviously, we a long conversation, but.
Nathan, I think one of the things that we need to think about as we address that question, because that's a very real question. It affects the daily work, and having clarity there is getting support from Jim and from Terry on where the transition is from strategic planning, so this big picture service plan planning, and operational planning on an annual basis, because I think some of how to address your I think very realistic concern is for us to be sure that we have companions for that as we move forward. So strategically, we can still have the same big picture goals and aspirations, but those ongoing pivots happen at the operating level if those two documents are working well together. So I think you raise a really important point.
So I guess my question is, obviously, we need to keep moving forward because we need to take care of the programs we have and the initiatives that we have. We need a plan. What's running parallel to that where we can be doing some of that, what Kim just mentioned, because I don't know whose wheelhouse does that fall into, right?
Okay.
And I would love for some commissioners to be involved. I just don't know what that looks like.
Okay.
This is not a direct answer to your question, but hopefully by the time the August meeting rolls around, we will have more clarity on what's happening at the federal level. And that certainly would be the next opportunity for the full commission to have those kinds of discussions. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I mean, I think that's very helpful, but I'm also thinking through like, and this is, I don't know all of the ins and outs and in the weeds as you and Steph would, but should something happen, another drastic pivot or a change or a cancellation at even a greater scale, it's like, when I think about the staff in this team, right? At the end of the day, we're the commission for the Volunteer Tennessee. I care about you all as staff, care about all the programs,
Yes.
care about you all as staff, right? What does that mean for you? Do you, right? You know, if I think about a Lizzie or a Latifa, not to call you all out, right? But where AmeriCorps is a significant portion of the job and it gets the boot, what does that mean? Like in terms of their day to day, do they have a job? Do they not have a job? How does their job pivot? That I think those things, and I think they're ongoing conversations. And I would rather us have a plan in place that takes care of those people. That's where I think that comes from.
And so what do we do with that? Do we come back as an executive committee and discuss these?
I think that's a step and executive committee, and if it's relevant, I think Adam probably definitely needs to be in that conversation from the FA perspective and Jim, but maybe we just, I think that conversation needs to happen. And obviously but the work's got to keep going too, so I don't want to railroad what we need to do, but I think we've been naive. We didn't have that conversation.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the executive committee should meet together and have a conversation about what our plan would be.
Yeah, just
in
a
line.
little bit more operational strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Would that take an act of Congress, or how does that actually work? Like, well, no, because I mean, like, isn't it just from an executive president? Is it for AmeriCorps, or is that through Congress? Of like, they choose.
It depends who you ask.
Do we have anyone who can answer that question?
Well, in a normal, well, in a normal time, yes, the program has been authorized and appropriated. The funds have been appropriated by Congress. The funds are there to do the work, but the executive branch obviously has a say in how it's implemented. So it is not clear yet what would happen if Congress moves forward and funds the AmeriCorps program again at the same levels as it's been funded previously, disregarding these terminations that the agency has made. It's not clear what that looks like.
Yes, basically it's a question of, like, an executive order couldn't just be like, okay, AmeriCorps done. That's not how it works.
In theory.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it's under the Constitution, as I understand it, the president does not have the authority to set aside statutes that are passed by the Congress.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah, that is my understanding of our
Yes.
institutional system.
Okay, is there anything else that? Is there anything else that we need to discuss, any more comments on this framework and these core areas in our steps?
I I just have a question or a comment, just to be taken as you wish. But I've looked at this, I've attended some of the meetings where this was discussed. I really like where this is going and what the document is. My question is, and maybe this is already in the works, but do we need some sort of a heading or a title or a catchphrase for each of these categories or each of these teams?
Yes, so Nathan was on it earlier.
Yeah,
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
When you were saying your wordsmithing, is that what you're?
Yeah, I think so. I think it seems to be, I think the content's there. We just gotta make it presentable.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, all right, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna let this conversation rest on the state plan. We are going to continue to meet together with the chairs to get this in a better form. We're also going to have the executive committee meet to talk about a plan in action in case of the worst scenario. Okay, anything else that I need to add to that? I think this is a good time for us to get our lunch. And so it's, let me see, it is 11:22. So if you would get your lunch, make sure that you get the right lunch. And let's come back here. It is 11:22. Let's be here back ready to go at 11:35. At 11:35, and then we'll just work through lunch and we'll continue. Good?
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm going to stop the recording temporarily because when you get over like a certain hour